Here today I will be introducing to you guys what I believe are the most underrated art supplies tools that I have currently, and also some sketchbooks that I have been using for quite some time, and they're holding up really well. These are my messy sketchbooks and my idea planning, and also I use these for like portrait sketching and also learning and practicing drawing. And here are the art supplies tools that I will be using today. And let's get into it. Most of you guys already know about this one. These are crayons, and they are probably the most accessible ones. And then here I just have a box that you guys can put all your guys' broken pieces in, or your crayons. You can find these on Amazon, at Target, Fred Meyer's. Yeah, these work really well. When your box starts falling apart, you can just put them in here. But I have those. So here are the first ones I'm going to be working with, and let's get to it. We're going to be doing some portrait sketching. When you're working with crayons, you want to make sure that your crayon is a bit short. You don't want it to be too long, otherwise it's going to be a bit more difficult to work with. If your paper is a lot shorter like mine, so if you're working with a smaller piece of paper, make sure your crayon is a lot shorter. If you're going to be working with a paper very large, like a 20 by 16, then it's okay to just use like a full crayon like this. But it's definitely going to be a lot easier working with something small like this. That way you can render the planes of the face, and you can work in some details as well around the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So we're going to be using dark colors. We don't want to use something too light. We want to use something darker. If you want to start off with just a wash of a color, then it's fine to use something light. But that way you know what you're drawing. You want to use something darker, like a red or a blue or a green, just anything dark. So like I said, you will use this very similarly to a vinyl. And what we're doing here is we're just laying down the head quickly. Kind of want the overall shape of that head. And then make sure we know where the eyes go. And we're working really messy with this, similarly to what we would do with like charcoal or vinyl. You don't want to get too precious with it, too precious with the drawing. And that's how we're working with this. Here's what it looks like. It's very waxy, and my hands did get a little bit stained, but not as much as a charcoal pencil or a charcoal stick would, or a vinyl stick would. But there was some staining on my fingers, but it's definitely is a lot less messier than those. Here's another underrated art supply tool that I have seen a lot of artists not use as much here on YouTube, but I do find that quite a few artists do have this one already. This is a double-sided pencil. And here, this one is by Caran d'Ache. This side is graphite, and then this side is a color pencil. So there are quite a varieties of these with different colors that you can get. And this is just one that I have with me right now here on my desk. The other ones are in my etcher bag, so we're going to be using this one. I wasn't able to show much of the process for this sketch because I am working with graphite, and graphite is very shiny and reflective. so you weren't able to really see what I was doing throughout the time that I was sketching this one. What I love about these Caran d'Ache versions of the double-sided pencil is that the colored pencil side is water soluble. Here are the Derwent drawing pencils, set of 12, and these are one of my favorites to use. I love using these pencils. As you can see, I use them quite a bit. And the main reason why I love using them is because of how thick they are and how creamy they are. They feel very different than Caran d'Ache pencils or like polychromos pencils. Very, very different. They're a lot smoother, a lot more creamier than that. And the way that I use them is I work with them monochromatic, so I will just use a little bit more pressure than what I normally do for when I want to get my darker values. And then for the lighter values, I just press a lot less. And I really just enjoy that look. Today's topic of the day, we're going to be discussing really overhyped art supplies that you see everywhere on Instagram, social media, TikTok, especially here on YouTube. There are a lot of overhyped art supplies here on YouTube, but mainly on TikTok. And that is because I feel like the younger artists get really influenced quickly when it comes to art supplies, because when you're first starting off, you kind of don't know where to start off, and you're sort of like don't know what art supplies to get and what materials you need for that specific medium that you're going to be working with. Just like in every community and in the fashion world and technology and things like that, there's always a very trendy thing in those communities. In the art world, there are a lot of very trendy art supplies and art tools that people get influenced by from other artists that are getting these sponsorships and are being sent these art supplies by these companies. A few years back, I think the most trendiest art supply and medium was Copic markers. Like everybody was making videos on Copic markers and how to use them. But yeah, that was like really one of the mediums that I remember very early on. Really like skyrocketing like everywhere all over the art world. And especially a lot of younger audiences, they're the ones that really got influenced, and they bought a lot of Copic markers and they just ended up hoarding them and not really using them. So there was that one. And then after the whole Copic marker and alcohol marker phase went down, then the acrylic markers and sort of mainly the Posca pens. That's what I mainly saw. Posca pens were like skyrocketing, like everybody was, being influenced and everybody was buying these Posca pens. And then I think after Posca pens, it was the Himi gouache, and then just gouache in general, especially acrylic gouache. Not so much just regular gouache, but especially acrylic gouache. That was just like, everybody was buying them, everybody had them. And then again, people started hoarding them and then not really using them. But that's usually kind of how it goes with these art supplies. It's like, they become very trendy and then people are like buying them, but then they sort of either they don't use them at all and it kind of just sits there. They only use it a few times and then, they're done with it, or they tend to like just hoard them one after another after the next release. And then the next thing I believe was the Caran d'Ache Neo Colors 2 Aquarelle. And those are still kind of popular. It kind of died down. People aren't really buying these anymore. But I got mine because a professor recommended them to me and they wanted us to use a medium that we were not used to using and that, we didn't have. So they just wanted us to explore something new. So that's why I got those. And that happens a lot. When you're at art school, you're going to, try different mediums and you're going to see what you like best and you're going to work with different things because you're in different classes learning different things. You're going to be in an anatomy class, you're going to be in a drawing class, you're going to be in an illustration class. Depending on what art class you're going to be taking, that's going to determine what supplies you're going to need to be purchasing. And that's mainly why I have a lot of different mediums, because I took a lot of different art classes while I was in art school. So before purchasing an art supply or tools, you want to determine what medium you're going to be working with And what you're going to be using that medium for. Is that medium going to be used to create art to sell? Is it going to be used to create prints? Is it going to be used, to make stickers? Are you going to be, working in your sketchbook? Is it just for fun? Are you a hobbyist? Or, are you a professional? Or are you a student? If you're a student, you're going to want to use something that is more, student grade level. If you're someone who is in an art school, you're going to use a artist grade level or a professional grade level art supply. So the difference between student, artist, and professional grade level of art mediums and tools, all that depends on the materials that were used to make that art supply and tool. Something like a paint is gonna have less pigment in it and more cheaper pigment, synthetic pigment in the student grade level paints, and the more professional are gonna be more pigmented and they're gonna have less of that extra stuff. So really depending on where you're at with your art, that's going to determine what you're going to be purchasing, either a student, an artist, or a professional level. Depending on what kind of artist you are, that's also going to depend on what materials you might gravitate towards. So if you're going to be a painter, you're going to gravitate towards, painting mediums. If you're going to be someone who is an illustrator, you're going to want to use stuff to create illustrations. And then beyond that, if you're a painter and you want to start painting, you want to figure out if you're going to be painting with oils, acrylic, gouache, or watercolors. And if you're going to be a graphic novel artist, are you going to work with inking and watercolor? Are you going to work with alcohol markers? Are you going to work with acrylic markers? It really just depends on what kind of artist you are and where you're at with the level of art, Are you a student? Are you an artist? Are you a professional? Or are you a hobbyist? And I'm telling you guys this because these viral art mediums may not be the best fit for you. They may be great for somebody else, but they might not be for you. So just really think about, what kind of art you're into and what kind of art you want to create. These art mediums that I'm recommending to you guys are for those of you that are going to be doing sketchbook work, or that are going to be drawing portraits or anatomy in your sketchbook and are going to continue to be practicing those things. Anybody outside of that, these mediums are probably not going to be the best for you. And here's why I want to recommend this one. This one is very beginner friendly. It doesn't cost very much. It's, just a pen. It's not waterproof though, that's one thing. And I just want to show you guys like the line variations that you can get with this. So you can go from really thin with these, you can create, or you can create bolder lines like that. And then you can create like somewhat thicker lines. You can go from thick to thin. Here I'm gonna go from thin to thick. There we go. So something like that. This works really well with someone who is also very heavy-handed as well. So if you're heavy-handed, I would recommend something like this to start off with. Crayons are very beginner friendly for students that are still learning anatomy and portraits, and then for somebody that has moved beyond that skill level and already knows how to draw portraits and anatomy, then you can start off next with using something like this pen. So if you're gonna want to get into inking stuff, then this pen is perfect for those of you guys who have a hard time controlling a brush pen and a dipping pen. You know, a dipping pen, you have to constantly feed the nib, but with something like this, you know, you continuously have that ink flow. And then you also have that control of the nib, so you can still go from thin to thick and get that line weight variation. And if you wanted to, you could also use these crayons the same as I did here. All you will need to do is just sharpen the point a bit more, but you would get similar results because the crayon is very soft in its texture that it creates. The texture is very soft. But yeah, it's all depending on how you use your materials. You're gonna get different style of sketching.